Cleverer, cleaner and classier, this improved 5th generation Volkswagen Polo Supermini remains the quality choice it's always been. It may look little different, but the important changes lie beneath the bonnet and on the equipment list. Some fresh new engines and a bit of extra high-tech in the Golf-style cabin both aim to please loyal buyers while keeping this car class competitive against more recent rivals. As a result, this model remains very viable as a carefully conservative choice in its class. Low-key but likeable. Supermini fashions can come and go, but one model seems to remain impervious to fickle fancy. The Volkswagen Polo is somehow above all of that, and if you buy one, you'll probably think yourself to be so too. Over 14 million Polos have been sold since the car first went on sale back in 1975. But we're looking here at a significantly revised version of the Mark V model that was first introduced in 2009, then upgraded in the spring of 2014 with the improvements I'm going to be discussing. And you might need my help here because you won't appreciate many of the updates from a casual glance. In fact, there's not a single sheet metal difference over the original model, all part of that subtlety that I mentioned earlier. Don't be misled though. Instead of pointlessly wasting money on widespread changes to the front end, as most manufacturers would with a mid-term update, Volkswagen has instead blown the budget on things of more importance, with a thorough engine update, extra high technology and reassuring safety. Plus, there's a cabin now properly reminiscent of the only slightly larger 7th generation Golf. Could they have done more? Of course. Any brand capable of democratising new technology, as it has in futuristic models like the E-Up, the hybrid Golf GTE and the Extreme XL1, could certainly have bought us a Polo that would have raised a few more eyebrows. But then part of the appeal of this car lies precisely in the fact that it doesn't do that. It doesn't draw attention to itself in any way other than to subtly suggest a conservative cleverness on the part of its owner. If that appeals, then stay with me as we put this car to the test. There was once a time, and it wasn't very long ago, when there was usually a penalty to pay if you wanted the slight but significant extra class of having a Polo on your driveway rather than a more mundane mainstream rival, say a Vauxhall Corsa, a Ford Fiesta or a Peugeot 208. You felt it beneath the bonnet with the old nail of an engine Volkswagen forced you into having if budgeting limits were not to be exceeded. And you felt it around the bends with driving dynamics that distinctly discouraged any kind of enthusiastic progress. Is this facelifted 5th generation model different? Well, it depends upon your expectations. You feel that it's different because in most models there's more of a willing engine beneath the bonnet. I'll get to that in a minute. And the response also seems improved because via a smarter 3-spoke wheel you control a more efficient fully electric steering setup rather than the old electro-hydraulic system. The manual gear change is also slick, 5 speeds on the feebler entry-level models, but 6 ratios on the more powerful ones. And the brakes deliver exactly the kind of smooth retardation that you'd want. Those are the positives, offsetting the reality that actually the Wolfsburg engineers haven't done anything at all to improve the way that this car handles. So it still isn't as fun to drive as a Fiesta, a Peugeot 208 or a Renault Clio. For most Polo people, that won't matter one jot. The original version of this 5th generation model considerably narrowed the previously yawning dynamic gap between this car and the class-leading Ford, and many potential owners will quite happily trade the remaining differences that do exist for this Volkswagen model's superior long-distance refinement and more impressive ride. If I had a 3-hour drive to do and a choice of small cars to do it in, these are certainly the keys I'd pick up every time. Which is all very well and good, but most Superminis don't tend to spend their lives pounding the motorways. To Ford fans, incidentally, I'd also point out that they're even less likely to be habitually thrown around country roads. No, it's on the dull day-to-day journeys woven into the fabric of our everyday lives that cars of this kind must really perform. How does this Polo stack up here? Well, here's a few things I've noticed. The ride in town is as good as it is on the open road, easily shrugging off pockmarked urban surfaces. That steering system I just mentioned is nice to twirl around on city streets too, lacking the remote PlayStation feel of some rival electric setups, and combining with the large glass area to make parking a doddle. Oh, and the seats are some of the most supportive I've tried in a small car at this price point, an important point for Supermini buyers. After all, it isn't only long distance journeys that can take, well, up to 2 to 3 hours. I mentioned that there were changes beneath the bonnet. Quite a few, in fact, in the now Euro 6 compliant engine range. These include a revised diesel, now 1.4 litres in capacity. Then there's clever ACT cylinder deactivation technology at the top of the lineup, and the adoption at last of the efficient 90 PS 16-valve 1.2 litre TSI petrol unit we've seen in rival Seats and Skodas for ages, in place of the wheezy old 1.4 litre petrol unit. Now, this TSI power plant comes with the option of a 7-speed DSG twin-clutch automatic gearbox that'll better suit urban-bound folk. And as before, you can have a pokier version of this same engine with 110 PS if you're prepared to stretch to top spec trim. Go for that pokier motor and rest to 62 miles an hour occupies 9.3 seconds on the way to 122 miles an hour, as opposed to 10.8 seconds and 114 miles an hour in the 90 PS version. Either way, this is the engine to choose if you want petrol power and need your Supermini to be able to attempt longer trips as well as shorter ones. But not everyone needs that capability, of course, and for those that don't, the version that I'm using here should be just about ideal. It uses the chirpy 3-cylinder 1-litre petrol unit borrowed from Volkswagen's little Up city car, offered with either 60 or 75 PS and providing an eager feel that's a big step forward from the feeble 1.2 litre units this Mark V Polo was originally launched with. Now here I've got the lower powered version, and on paper its figures don't bode well. 62 miles an hour from rest, quoted at a leisurely 15.5 seconds, and the top speed just about scraping to 100 miles an hour. On the road though, reasonably rapid progress is nonetheless possible if you're prepared to drop a gear or two and put up with a bit of extra 3-cylinder thrum in the cabin. Better though perhaps to stretch to the 75 PS unit, which improves those figures to 14.3 seconds and 108 miles an hour. I should also mention that Volkswagen offers another 1-litre petrol variant of this car, this time using the more sophisticated TSI technology and developing 95 PS, the company's first petrol-powered, fully-fledged Blue Motion model. Unless you really do clock up the motorway miles, it is for me a better alternative to the 3-cylinder TDI diesels, now all 1.4 litres in size and available with either 75 or 90 PS. Of course, there'll be some for whom nothing but the torquey pulling power of a diesel will do. You will, after all, get more than twice the torque in a TDI that you would in an entry-level 1-litre petrol Polo like this one. Now, these people might possibly want to know that the 75 PS TDI makes 62 miles an hour from rest in 12.9 seconds en route to 108 miles an hour, while the 90 PS version improves that to 10.9 seconds and 114 miles an hour. But they'll probably be more interested to know that this engine forms the basis for a frugally tweaked diesel Blue Motion variant that can better 90 miles to the gallon in regular motoring. That leaves only the sporty models in the lineup, both of which are really rather clever. First up is the Blue GT, a warm hatch introduced towards the end of the original 5th generation model's life cycle to showcase Volkswagen's clever ACT, active cylinder technology. The 1.4 litre engine used now puts out a useful 150 PS, and during light to medium throttle loads is able to imperceptibly shut down 2 of the 4 cylinders for greater efficiency, though can open these up again in milliseconds should you need to put your foot down. Now, the result of all this cleverness is rather impressive, delivering a Polo that can sprint to 62 miles an hour in just 7.8 seconds on the way to 137 miles an hour, yet also one that, with restraint, can theoretically return exactly the same real-world 60 miles to the gallon economy as this entry-level 1 litre 60 PS version. Have cake, eat it. It's as simple as that. Almost as clever, but nothing like as frugal, is the flagship hot hatch GTI model, now offered for the first time with manual transmission, as well as a paddle shift DSG Auto. Once more, you'll find a 1.4 litre TSI engine beneath the bonnet, but this one uses both supercharging and turbocharging to achieve the 180 PS needed for active participation in the Supermini hot hatch segment. The supercharger helps you fire off the line in a 0 to 62 mile an hour time of under 7 seconds before the turbo cuts in at around 3,000 RPM and helps push the car on towards its 142 mile an hour top speed. So here's the improved 5th generation model, and here's the old one. Notice the differences? Well, you'll probably need a bit of help there because there aren't many, and none of them affect the modern, clean and efficient Giugiaro pen shape of the sheet metal, all of which is entirely intentional. Volkswagen sternly tells us that the Polo doesn't follow short-term fashion trends. Aesthetic updates are limited to tweaks like this bit of extra chrome trim that connects the front fog lights and attempts to make the car look wider, though in fact it isn't. It is a couple of millimetres longer than before though, thanks to revised bumpers, below which at the front there's a larger lower air intake. Oh, and I should also talk about lights, which on plusher versions can now be LED lit, a rare feature in this class. At the rear, the changes are equally subtle, whether you opt for 3 or 5 doors. But then, as I've been saying, that's what Polo people like. The rear reflectors are now embedded into the bumper, another attempt to offer up an impression of extra width. And nice touches like the LED number plate lighting add a bit of extra class. It all means that, as before, the Polo feels smarter and more mature than the average Supermini, though from a casual glance, you might struggle to define exactly why that is. When all said and done, a lot of the aesthetic tricks are really targeted at making this car feel as much like its larger Golf stablemate as possible. And if you didn't know that already, then you'll certainly be made more aware of the fact once inside. Dominating the dash is the same modular infotainment touchscreen that you'd find on Volkswagen's larger family hatch, 5 or 6.5 inches in size, depending on the spec that you've chosen. Now, it's one of those that reacts to the kind of swiping movements with your fingers that you'd use on a smartphone, and most models can be specified with a clever mirror link feature that allows you to display and control certain approved Android apps on a screen that you'll also use to control Bluetooth phone connectivity and the decent 6-speaker stereo that even budget versions get. Otherwise, the look, feel and functionality of the controls, the clearly designated instruments and the neat switchgear should all be pretty familiar to Polo people, even though Volkswagen insists that all of it has been redesigned. As ever, it's easy to find a perfect driving position thanks to a height adjustable seat and a reach, as well as a height adjustable steering wheel. And as expected, there remains a reassuring solidity to everything that you touch, and plenty of soft touch plastics to remind you just how far small cars have come in recent years, though unfortunately this still doesn't extend into the doors. Gloss black highlights added in around the dash try to lift the Bulgarian thrift store experience previously provided by baseline models, while slightly plusher versions like this one get a few welcome splashes of chrome. And in the back, well, I'd worried that this revised model's small 9mm drop in roof height might compromise things a little here. As it turns out, the travelling experience is little different from before, once you've taken a seat inside, getting in being an easy enough process if, as here, you've opted for the 5-door version. As with all Superminis, the provision of 3 seat belts is a little ambitious if you're talking about carrying adults, and ultimate comfort will depend upon the legroom you can persuade your front seat fellow passengers to free up. Having said that, there's significantly more space back here than you get in, say, a Ford Fiesta, which isn't surprising when you consider that this Polo is these days as big as a supposedly much larger Golf-sized family hatchback was back in the 90s. As a result, 2 adults should be quite happy on short to medium-length trips, and a trio of kids will be fine. And out back, well, the 280-litre boot might be fractionally smaller than the trunk you'd get in rival Fiesta, Peugeot 208 or Renault Clio models, but I prefer it because the figure quoted doesn't force you to put up with one of those nasty little puncture repair kits. Good luck with one of those if you ever get stranded on a dark, wet and rainy hard shoulder. Now here you get a proper full-size spare wheel, a very rare feature in this class. There's also a repositionable false floor, concealing a small area for hiding valuables, and most variants get the usual split folding rear seat that folds to reveal a 952-litre total capacity. Now that's one of the smaller spaces in this class, but it should be more than sufficient for most owners. List pricing ranges mainly in the £11,000 to £19,000 bracket, with a £630 premium at each trim level if you want this 5-door body style rather than the 3-door version. Now, it's worth pointing out that the entry-level 1-litre 60 PS petrol model that I've been trying here is really aimed at urban-based people. It's offered with better trim and a pokier 75 PS output for a couple of £1,000s more, but by that point you'd be better off going for the 1.2 TSI 90 PS petrol variant. The only power plant in the range with the option of automatic transmission, though you'll pay nearly £1,400 extra for that. Further up the range, you'll need a budget starting from around £15,000 for a TDI diesel, or from around £18,000 for the Rapid Blue GT model with its 1.4 TSI petrol engine and clever cylinder deactivation system. So, how does that stack up against Supermini rivals in value terms? Well, let's start with Superminis from this Volkswagen's partner brands, cars that share many of its mechanicals. A Polo undercuts an Audi A1, of course, which is a car riding on the same underpinnings, though direct comparisons are difficult because most of the A1's engines are more powerful. Seat's Ibiza is a better match and uses the TSI and ACT petrol engines we really like at a substantial model-for-model saving over equivalent Polo derivatives. However, elsewhere in the Ibiza lineup, the engine technology is older, dirtier and thirstier, so you need to factor that into any tempting deals your Seat stockist might offer you. I'd be more likely to look at a Mark III model Skoda Fabia, which has a wider range of up-to-date engines and offers a small but significant model-for-model price saving over this Polo, though of course doesn't come with the same badge appeal. The toughest competition for this car, though, will of course come from outside the Volkswagen family of brands, with cars like Ford's Fiesta and Vauxhall's Corsa. Ordinary versions of these will typically undercut their direct Polo equivalents by around £1,000. But where both brands wheel out their new technology, the situation is very different. Take Ford's much trumpeted 3-cylinder 1-litre EcoBoost petrol engine, for example. Now, in feeble 80 PS form, it costs around £1,000 more than an equally high-tech Polo 1.2-litre TSI 90 PS, and it's hardly any cheaper to run. So I know which I'd rather have. On to the French contingent. Peugeot's 208, Renault's Clio, and to some extent Citroen's C3 are all very good products, and you typically save a few £100 over an equivalent Polo by choosing any one of them. It's as well to remember, though, that you'd probably lose that money again come resale time in the lower residuals all three of those cars would achieve. Now, the same applies if you're thinking of something Korean like a Hyundai i20 or a Kia Rio. A better investment is Toyota's Yaris, priced at Polo money, but with a restricted engine range and much less seats folded space. For space, you'd want a Honda Jazz, but that's pricier than a Polo and you can't have a diesel. If, having considered all of that, you conclude that it is this Volkswagen that you really want, then I'd understand. And if so, you're going to want to know just how generous Volkswagen has been when it comes to standard spec. The answer is that there'll probably be more included than you might expect, though I'd have thought that a locking system on the key fob and a split-folding rear bench would have been included at base trim level, maybe also electric mirrors. Unfortunately, you've got to progress further up the range for those. What you do get with the entry-level spec is the neat Golf-style colour information touchscreen, though on the least expensive versions it is only 5 inches in size. Now, it's through this that you can access other key standard features like the 6-speaker DAB audio system, the SD card reader, the USB point with an aux-in socket and the Bluetooth phone connectivity. You also get body-coloured bumpers, electric front windows, driver's seat height adjustment, central locking that you activate with your key in the lock, plus a hill holder clutch to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and a proper full-size spare wheel. Only the base S trim level does without air conditioning, and even here it's a feature that you can add to your car for around £700. Otherwise, a chilled cabin comes as standard, and most models get the kind of features fitted to the version that I'm testing here. Things like a leather-trimmed multifunction steering wheel, a trip computer, a larger 6.5-inch infotainment screen, and 15-inch alloy wheels. In this case, I've also got metallic paint and an extra cost winter pack, which includes heated seats, headlamp washers, and heated screen washer jets you'll be glad of when the frost comes. I've got the Discover satellite navigation set up too, though an alternative to shelling out for that would be to find just £150 more for the MirrorLink system you can add to the infotainment screen on most models. Now that enables you to view approved apps from your smartphone on the dash display, and these, of course, could include navigational aids. And safety? Well, it's disappointing that unlike many Supermini rivals, this Polo doesn't have curtain airbags across the range, only twin front and side bags. Despite that, I'd still rate it as one of the safer Superminis you can buy. Safety is, after all, about more than just airbags, and this car offers one of the stiffest body shells in its sector. As a result, if you owned an old pre-2009 Mark IV model Polo and switched to this Mark V version, you'd be getting yourself a car that, in a head-on accident, would deform half as much. As you'd expect, all variants get the usual electronic assistance for braking, stability and traction control, and there are anti-whiplash head restraints, isofix anchor points for child safety seats, and a pedestrian-friendly bonnet. The result is an excellent 5-star 90% overall rating in the recently toughened Euro NCAP safety tests. The big news, though, with this improved 5th generation Polo is the standard inclusion across the range of the clever automatic post-collision braking system borrowed from the larger Golf. Now, the thinking here is based around the fact that most traffic accidents are multiple collision affairs involving a second impact after the original collision. Which is why, should your Polo be involved in a crash, it will automatically brake itself to minimise the likelihood of you going on to hit something else. Clever. If you want to go further, you can get an affordably priced extra cost package, offering all the latest compact car safety technology. Namely, a system that monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness and alerts you of the need to stop for a restorative coffee. Then there's ACC Adaptive Cruise Control that uses radar sensors to automatically keep you a safe distance from the car in front on the highway. And City Emergency Braking, which works in urban conditions to scan the road ahead of you at speeds of up to 18 miles an hour for potential collision hazards. If one is detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond or aren't able to, the car will automatically brake to reduce the severity of any resulting accident. Volkswagen has long been trying to drive down running costs using the clever Blue Motion technology that you'll find on all Polo models. This includes much of the stuff that we're now getting familiar with on more efficient Superminis. And I'm thinking of things like battery regeneration to help utilise energy that would otherwise be lost under braking. Then there's a stop-start system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. The fact that your Polo will come with Blue Motion technology, and like this particular derivative will be badged that way, doesn't make it a fully fledged Blue Motion model though. I can't be the only one who finds it confusing that there are also separate proper Blue Motion models set apart from the rest of the range. In efficiency terms, these are designed to go a step further. In the Polo lineup, there are now two of these. First up is, rather uniquely for Volkswagen, a fully fledged Blue Motion model that uses petrol power. In this case, a freshly developed 95 PS 1 litre TSI engine capable of 68.9 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 94 grams per kilometre of CO2. Pretty close to what you get from the diesel version for an awful lot less money. Talking of diesel, there's also a fully fledged diesel-powered Blue Motion derivative. That's based on the 90 PS 1.4 litre TDI unit. Potentially, this particular Polo could cost you a little more to run than a motorbike, able as it is to return 91 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle while putting out just 82 grams per kilometre of CO2. Now that's a useful step forward from the figures that you get from the standard 75 and 90 PS 1.4 litre TDI models, identical at 83.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 88 grams per kilometre of CO2. Here though, I've opted for the least expensive entry-level 1 litre MPI 3-cylinder petrol engine that this Polo now borrows from Volkswagen's smaller up city car. In 60 PS guys, as tested here, this delivers 60.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 106 grams per kilometre of CO2, figures that fall only slightly to 58.9 miles to the gallon and 108 grams per kilometre in the pokier 75 PS version of this same unit. A better option though, if you can stretch to it, is the most important fresh engine introduction to this facelifted Mark V Polo range, the 90 PS version of the 1.2 litre TSI petrol unit. Now here, the fuel and CO2 figures are almost identical to those of the 1 litre models, yet you get a lot more performance and refinement as part of the bargain. There's no real running cost downside either in ordering this 1.2 litre TSI engine in its pokier 110 PS form. Either way, you're looking at a set of figures that'll see you having to shell out no more than £20 in road tax each year, which is the most that you'll pay to tax any mainstream Polo variant. Talking of running cost downsides, as I was, they're also noticeable by their absence in the rapid Blue GT model with its clever 150 PS 1.4 litre TSI ACT petrol engine. Now, ACT stands for Active Cylinder Technology, which means that during light to medium throttle loads, the engine management software can imperceptibly shut down 2 of the 4 available cylinders for greater efficiency, though can open these up again in milliseconds should you need to put your foot down. Now, as a result, a Polo Blue GT, if driven sensibly, can potentially return a pretty much identical set of fuel and CO2 figures to those you get in a feebler 1 litre or 1.2 litre variant. The quoted stats for a Blue GT are 58.9 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 110 grams per kilometre. Finally, I should also mention the hot hatch Polo GTI variant with its clever supercharged and turbocharged 1.4 litre TSI power plant. Even this is pretty frugal, capable of close to 50 miles to the gallon in regular motoring and less than 140 grams per kilometre of CO2.
What else? Well, the 3-year, 60,000-mile warranty isn't anything to write home about in a marketplace where other rivals offer more. But there is a choice of either fixed or flexible servicing regimes, depending on the mileage you expect to cover. The fixed package appropriate for cars covering under 10,000 miles a year. And insurance groupings? Well, these should be affordable. Expect premiums based around groups 7E to 10E for the 1 litre MPI models, ratings based between groups 15E and 19E for the 1.2 litre TSI variants. The Blue GT is rated at group 24E. If you're looking at a 1.4 TDI diesel, expect ratings to range between 13E to 16E. Residual values are strong. Expect to get between 44 and 51% of your original purchase price back after 3 years or 36,000 miles.
Let's not beat around the bush here. You don't buy this little Volkswagen to make a fashion statement, nor will many of its loyal customers be much interested in driving on their door handles. Polo people are somehow beyond all of that. Opting for one of these suggests that you choose to drive a small car rather than necessarily needing to. It's all down to a small but subtle difference of emphasis, as thoughtfully fashioned as the small but subtle changes visited upon this much improved 5th generation model. Volkswagen hasn't fundamentally updated it because it didn't need to, but it has provided for significant steps forward in terms of efficiency, safety and technology. The result might be little more than a shrunken Golf, but then that's exactly what most buyers want. Because of that, I'm guessing that many real-world Supermini customers would find it quite hard not to like the thought of a Polo in their driveway. Overall, it's true that there are certainly trendier choices you could make in this segment, and cars that offer up a more dynamic drive. But if you're a typical Polo person, I reckon you might quickly tire of their charms. At the end of the day, there's much to be said for an extra touch of quality and class. Seek those as your priorities, and you'll find this little Supermini more than happy to oblige.